with Jacques Vergès, no? He, on behalf of his unconditionally pro-Arab attitude, with what I have no problem, he's literally tried to make into an alliance with anyone, from ex-Nazis, neo-Nazis and so on, just insofar as, you know, anything goes. I think this is catastrophic politics. Even in the sense of politics, not only in the sense of some kind of abstract moralistic reasoning, how can you, even in the terms of political efficiency, it's catastrophic. And it really, he went to the end here. So again, I think that more and more, I think that for me, this fact that no matter who comes good as a potential ally is rather an effect of, first, let me make one point clear. The problem for me here is not religion as such. There can be movements which are very fanatically religious, but play a very progressive role. The problem is the implicit ideological content, which can be religious or not. Like, religion doesn't bother me. What does bother me is if a movement defines itself explicitly, not so much even as anti-Semitic as against European modernity, where the main catastrophe is designated as the French Revolution, modern egalitarianism, and so on and so on. So here, I think that the hope professed even by Badiou that some movement may appear conservative now, but this is only the first step. In the long term, they will see who the true enemy is, like not the Jews, but American imperialism or whatever. I think it's a vain hope. I think that it's the same hope as if we were to say in the 30s, late 30s, the main enemy is United States, American English imperialism, so let's join Hitler. Later Hitler will see that it's not really the Jews, but capitalism as such, and so on and so on. But this is a genuinely tragic predicament, I claim. Because at the same time, I know that, you know why? Because we, the left, if you count yourself as left, we have to live this paradox that in short terms, we are again and again forced into coalitions with liberal Democrats. Like when you fight racism, when you fight for women's rights, for gay rights, you cannot but make a coalition there. But in the long term, everything depends on making a coalition precisely with those who are, if they are politicized at all today, are politicized on the right-wing populist base. That's our tragedy. Which is why I think, again, with all the stupid things he is doing, people like Chavez are precious today. They are the only ones who try to repoliticize ordinary people and so on. Okay, so since I went too long, the usual thing happened. The key part will have to stay out, so if you allow me 2-3 minutes just to conclude and to make my point. Now, what I wanted to do is to go into critique of political economy. Why do we need it today? The title of my talk refers to something noted by my good friend who wrote that wonderful book, Transcritique, whom I quote a lot, Cogin Karatani, who said that in Marx began when he was young with critique of religion. You know, when he says the critique of religion is the beginning of every critique. Then he went on, state, ideology, ended with critique of economy, political economy. But then the topic of fetishism means that what you find at the end is, again, a form of religion, but religion, theology inherent to capitalism itself, not as an abstract ideology, but in religious content, belief inherent to the very core of really existing, functioning capitalism. And this is why I claim we need this. By this I mean critique of political economy, which is at the same time fully aware not only of economy as objective science, but of all these subjective fetishes, illusions, etc., which has to be operative for the capitalist economy to function. This is what we need today. We need, it's not a choice, either critique of religion or critique, but critique of religion, which is the very focus of political economy. And here I think we can use, forgive him his Zionism, Moshe Postone, who again is one of the few who did his task. Let me just present briefly his position. It's a wonderful one. It's that Marx was a Marxist, if by Marxist we mean this vulgar economic determinism stuff. Somewhere from German ideology to mid-late 1850s. This is Marxist theory which passed into common knowledge as Marxism. Economic-based, economic relations basically determine, you know, all this, how should I put it, pathetic materialism, most forcefully developed in German ideology. Our starting point is the production of real life, all ideological phantasmagoria and so on are generated by real life processes, are its ideological reflexes and so on and so on. But he claims, Postone, and I get to agree with him, that when Marx, after the failure of the 48 revolution, returned to reading Hegel to understand properly critique of political economy, something clicked, deeply changed there. And although we do get occasional recidives, regressions, for example, the greatest one is, I think this, I never liked that Marx, the famous, that forward, I think, to the introduction to the political economy, where Marx, as it were, resumes his view. It's, I think, the worst of the worst simple historicist evolutionism. There are even other regressions all the time true. For example, in Capital and in Grundrisse, the very passage celebrated endlessly by Tony Negri, as Marx saw the future there. You know, the famous passages in, you can get all this on the internet, from Grundrisse, where Marx developed the hypothesis of general intellect, this preponderance of knowledge as a factor in production which makes meaningless development, makes meaningless labor theory of value and so on and so on. So first, you should notice how Marx is here. I think that precisely this part that Negri totally mistreated, it should be discarded. And what people don't notice that if you closely read Grundrisse, it is discarded. It's just, you know, Grundrisse was a manuscript. Marx was trying to develop one line and then immediately never returned to it. And he was right. First, it's Marx as a technological determinist and its purest. Marx never even mentioned politics there. He simply claims by the rise of the role of knowledge and so on, things will fall apart. Second thing, much more dangerous, and this is basically the worst technocratic Marx. Notice how when Marx talks about general intellect, he always uses the singular. All of a sudden, there is no society. There is humanity. He usually uses the term der Arbeiter, a worker, reduced to, he ironically used the term controller, night watchman, who just observes the automatized system going on. One should link this to another weird ideological mistake by Marx. Chapter 4, I think it's 4 or 5, of Capital, which begins with this general definition of labor. Labor as, you know, transformation of natural element and so on. I think it's ideology, it's a regression. You know why? Something very weird happens there at the level of content, if you read it. At the level of, abstraction. Marx says, I don't have time to quote, 5 minutes. Marx says there, just read me closely, that insofar as we observe concrete forms of labor, of course, it's always a particular social relation that determines it. Like every concrete historical form of labor happens within a certain social formation. But then Marx says, but if we observe labor abstractly, independently of our concrete social forms, we don't need society, we only get laborer on worker on one side, the stuff on which he or she works on the other side. Now this is a very strange conclusion. Wouldn't it be more logical to say, if we abstract from concrete society, we get social form as such? I claim there is a deep ideological content here, because we should connect this to his technocratic vision, only there in Grundrisse, of communism as a general intellect. It is as if this asocial, abstract essence of labor